Good evening. Today is the 12th day of September, leaving us only 59 days before the midterm elections. I'm Scott J. Hamilton, and I'm delighted that you're with us this evening. We've got a lot of news to share, some very good news, and some very challenging news to report. But we'll have all that and more on tonight's Hamilton Report. Thank you so much for tuning in and being with us tonight. It's always a pleasure and truly an honor that you invite us into your home on Monday evenings or whenever it is that you watch this broadcast. I want to say a special word of thanks to those of you who have been sharing this broadcast on social media. And I believe that that's very important because we've been talking to some tremendous guests and covering a lot of information over the last several months, and I'm going to encourage you to please continue to do that and invite your friends to tune in and watch live as well, because we love taking questions from our viewers, and your comments are very much appreciated as well. I said a moment ago that we have some good news to report and some very challenging news, but we're going to start with the good news. A Channel 9 poll that was commissioned of the Sooner poll, the results came out today. And this poll was done the first week in September. And I am thrilled to tell you that our candidate for State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Gina Nelson, has now pulled ahead of Ryan Walters in that very, very critical race. For the people who said that education is the most important thing on the ballot for them this year, they overwhelmingly went to Gina because she has a plan. She has the resources behind her, the experience, the expertise to truly make a positive impact in our schools. And what this means is not just for Gina, but with numbers like that, that's going to energize every ticket, every single race, whether it's House, Senate, whether it's a county election or a city election, and certainly the U.S. Congress. Because people are tired of the same old things, and they're tired of the rhetoric, and they're tired of just being pushed aside, and they're listening to positive messages, the reasons that we're going to vote in November. We're not scaring anyone to the polls. Frankly, we are just providing hope this year for good things in Oklahoma. So congratulations to Gina. She continues to need our help, as do all of our candidates. And we'll talk a little bit more about that toward the end of tonight's broadcast. But now comes the sad news. This is the 9th month of the year. And already there have been 14 inmates in the Oklahoma City County Jail who have died this year while in custody. That is a number that's unheard of in municipal jails anywhere in the country. And my guest this evening is someone who is truly, truly an expert on this, because he has been a very powerful voice for positive change when it comes to the way that our inmates are treated, the horrible conditions under which they have to exist. And so I'm very proud to welcome a man who I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with for a number of years now. Mark Faulk, welcome to the Hamilton Report. I'm so happy you could join us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, Scott. I appreciate everything that you're doing. And thank you for that bit of good news at the beginning of the show. And not to downplay any of the other elections, because they're all important. But the education secretary, that is insanely important, especially after I've watched his videos of him saying that he thinks we should eliminate handicap spaces in parking lots. So this is the guy that the Republicans have up there. And I think that we're at the point where surely we can all agree as Oklahomans, regardless of party, that public education is incredibly important across the board. So
I agree with you. And I should point out that when we were promoting this show earlier in the day, I mentioned that you were a well-known activist. What I should have said was a well-regarded activist, because you don't enter into something lightly. You never have. You find something that is critically important to you, that you take personally, and you run with it. And certainly you have been a very outspoken leader in the reform of the Oklahoma City County Jail. And with the tragic news of a 14th person dying this year, I don't know how our leaders are able to sleep at night with those horrifying numbers.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on that. And we are the deadliest jail in America, to put it bluntly. We are the deadliest jail in America, hands down. They are talking about closing Rikers Island because they've had 7 to 8 deaths a year there, and it's considered to be a horrible jail. We had 16 last year, and we're on track for 20 this year. And this is why I've been such a large proponent of doing things to reduce the jail population. You know, there's no reason that we have that many people in a jail, and it's its own issue, but everyone needs to understand that it's a circular issue. It has to do with homelessness, it has to do with mental health, drug and alcohol addiction, and even just poverty. People who are not able to pay their fines, or have missed a court date, or just really simple things that frankly should never put you in danger of a death sentence inside the jail. And keeping in mind that almost all, usually around 80% of the people in that jail, are awaiting trial. These people have not been convicted. John Basco, who died yesterday and was only in for 3 days, had not even been arraigned yet. So, and this one was particularly, they're all incredibly disturbing, but this one has some twists to it that are even more, you know, I'm a educated conspiracy theorist. I will not throw out conspiracies unless I have done enough research to believe that there is some potential validity to that. So I'll just say this raises some really serious questions. And his attorney came out and said the same thing. And it's because of 2 reasons. He does have a background, a criminal background, as do many people. Let me just start by saying, regardless of your criminal background, especially in nonviolent offenses, you know, those types of things, he was arrested. Supposedly, again, he was not arraigned, but supposedly he was detained for a drug-related charge. But the reality of it is that that's not a death sentence. You know what I mean? This is a thing.
Absolutely.
Where we tend to write off these lives as people who are maybe quote unquote bad actors, when in reality it could happen to any of us. And I'm not shy about saying that when I was young, I did plenty of things that could have ended me up in that county jail, and even spent a night there 2 years ago for protesting. So, but in his case, John Basco, he was one of the plaintiffs on the Baby Shark lawsuit against the county jail.
I'm going to stop you there just for a moment, Mark. That has been widely reported today, but I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what the whole Baby Shark torture is about.
Yeah, I mean, people used to make some comparisons about the county jail to Guantanamo Bay, and I say people, it's one of the people in the group that I work with, which really grew out of this issue with incarceration and all of the related, problems with the incarceration problem in Oklahoma. And it's the People's Council for Justice Reform. And one of the people in there is Chris Johnston, and he is an Afghanistan veteran. He did at least 2 tours in Afghanistan, and he has compared it to Guantanamo Bay. And the more things that go on, the more I realize that is not a an exaggeration. It just really isn't. So the Baby Shark torture case was a case where for hours at a time, him and a couple of other detainees in the jail were put in very uncomfortable positions, sometimes handcuffed to the wall, sometimes in standing positions, and very loudly they played Baby Shark over and over and over and over again as a form of torture. And these are not, people who are trying to get national secrets or secrets out of a spy and an espionage thing. These are just guards who are supposed to take care of the people who are awaiting trial and make sure that they're safe and that they get their fair day in court. And instead, many of them are dying. So a lawsuit was filed on that when that came out, and it became international news. And I keep saying that Oklahoma City, if we want to be a big league city, we cannot turn a blind eye to this. We just can't. So he was a plaintiff on that case. And also, when this came out, Senator Connie Johnson, who I have great admiration for and always have had, called me almost immediately and said this was her next door neighbor who died in this jail. And he was also the uncle to a young lady about a year ago who died as a result of a high-speed car chase in Oklahoma City. And everybody might remember this. It was a year ago, May. A lawsuit has also come out of that against the Oklahoma City Police Department. So this guy is connected to both a lawsuit against the county jail and the jail trust and a lawsuit against the Oklahoma City Police Department. His niece, it was a truck that was stolen. It had GPS on it, so they could literally track the truck. And the police tracked it and found it. And instead of waiting until it was safely stopped somewhere, because they knew where it was at any given time, they instead initiated a high-speed pursuit that went up to 95 miles per hour. And at ML King, and I believe Northwest 36 or somewhere on ML King, that truck ran a red light at a very high speed and killed a young lady who was pregnant in her car. And that was the niece of John Basco, who passed away over the weekend. So for his attorney to say, I'm suspicious of the circumstances, if anything, that's an understatement. That it's, you now have someone who should have been had extra protection, if anything, in that jail, because he literally, as I said, is a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the county, against the very jail that he died in within 3 days of being booked in. So,
I just want to say a word about those high-speed chases. A couple of years ago, my car was totaled as a result of a high-speed police chase. They were not chasing me. I just happened to be in the wrong place. They were going 70 miles an hour on a residential street. Wow. When the car they were chasing ran into me. It totaled my car. I was okay. But when we see this kind of thing happen, it has a dramatic impact on everyone involved. And so I'm delighted, frankly, that the family chose to file a lawsuit against the city for that, because it's needlessly putting lives at risk. So what we have here is two situations that put someone at risk. One resulted in the death of this young woman and her unborn child. And the other, this man was literally tortured while in the custody of the Oklahoma City County Jail.
Yeah.
And now he's gone.
And now he is mysteriously dead. As I said, this is the 14th death this year. We're on track for 20 deaths or more in that jail. I have never in my entire life, and I've done justice reform on different levels for decades. And I have never heard of anything like that. For all I know, we may never have had 20 deaths in a county jail in the history of the United States. I don't know, but I do know that at this time, over the last 2 years since the jail trust took over. And again, that's why I'm an adamant proponent of, I believe we need a DOJ takeover at this point.
Let's talk about that. What would that look like, Mark?
Well, they have done it at other jails. They recently took one over, I believe, in the Houston area, but they've done it in other areas, and it's not. There we go. Get my lighting better. It's one of the ways they tried to sell us the new jail and this jail bond was to say, oh, we don't want the DOJ to come in and tell us what to do. Well, at this point, yes, we do, because what they will do is they will make sure that the jail is constitutional and they will have direct oversight to that jail. And at a point when the average number of deaths across the country is somewhere around 4 per year, and we're 16 last year and heading for more than that this year, we clearly cannot run that jail properly ourselves. And
when you talk about an average of 4 a year, that even includes natural causes.
Absolutely.
So,
that's correct.
That's something to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
With as many people who have died in the custody, where they are supposed to be protected.
Yeah, absolutely. Your literal job is to allow people to have their constitutional right to a fair trial and then to be properly, sentenced if they did something wrong and they're found guilty. That's their job. That is their job. And so many things come out of this. We know that many of the people who are there on nonviolent offenses have mental health issues. And that's why we have advocated for a very long time that rather than build a bigger jail, that we reduce incarceration by putting proper mental health, community-based mental health facilities, not large corporate mental health facilities, which is the private prison companies. That's a whole nother area, but they are now beginning to take over many of the mental health and the halfway house facilities. So we know how bad they are. We don't need that. We need communities who know their own citizens treating their own citizens with qualified people. We need programs that allow people who can't make bail to be released and not to be there, not to be a debtor's prison, that they're not there just because they either couldn't make bail or couldn't pay a fine.
That's an important thing, because when you're talking a system of cash bail, that automatically favors those people with money.
That's right.
And so they're not the ones who are in jail awaiting their trial.
That's right. Yeah, we're right now in the middle of editing a 5-part documentary series about Larry Yarborough, who a lot of people have heard of. We helped to get him released about 3 years ago or 4 years ago on a life without parole. And we just finished editing the part where he spent 2 years in a county jail awaiting trial because on a possession charge, they set his bail at $450,000. So for 2 years, he sat in this jail. And again, these are not violent crimes. These are not the same. And I think we all agree that serious violent crimes have to be dealt with on a different level. These are people whose biggest crime oftentimes is just poverty, drug and alcohol addiction, homelessness, or mental health, or all of the above. And if we treat all of those things first, and we build transitional housing for the homeless, we set up Sean Cummings and Sarah Abana, who are both now elected council people and are with the People's Council for Justice Reform, have talked a lot about a bail revolving bail fund. So the Bail Project does a program where they have a certain amount of money and it's set aside for bail, and they pay someone's bail. They mostly do it for protesters and constitutional type charges. And they pay that bail, and then they send you notices every time you go to court. I get those myself because I'm still waiting to go to court 2 years later.
2 years later.
protest charge. I go in 3 weeks, so hopefully it will be done with then. But it's a great program, and what they do is they send you texts and they say, "Hey, you have court in 2 days. Can you be there? Do you need a ride? Can we help you?" If that program was set up just for low-level offenders who are not a threat to society by being back out on the street, if anything, they can keep their jobs, they can then contribute, they can take care of their families and do all those things while they're waiting to go to trial. And then when they go through the system, and it's been shown that people will show up for trial and they will show up at a higher percentage if you're sending them notifications, if you give them a little help, because most of these people need help. They don't need harsh punishment, because punishment in most cases does not decrease the amount of crime, nor does it help when it's mental health issues. If anything, we're traumatizing people in that jail. We don't want a mental health facility inside of the jail. We want community-based mental health. So if those things happen, your jail population will drop in half. So now
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Our viewer here says that they suck every penny out of families and inmates. Absolutely. Now think about it. If you cannot afford bail on a possession charge or whatever it may be, that means you're not working, so you're not able to provide for your family.
That's right.
It means very likely that your family will fall apart in the whatever time that, because most Oklahomans live from paycheck to paycheck.
Yep.
So this is a systemic problem and so when you're talking about community service for mental health, substance abuse, that makes so much sense, because here you would have professionals in their fields working with people in their communities.
That's right. That's right. And the reality of it is that there's all this talk about how complicated this is, but it's not. The three things that we named: mental health facilities, drug and alcohol addiction facilities, dealing with homelessness through transitional housing, because you can't help them if you can't get them stabilized, a housing first approach to that. And then a revolving bail fund that will keep all of the lowest level people out of the jail in the first place. Those things, that's a simple solution. The problem we have is that, I hate to say it, there's so much money in incarceration that, and I covered Wall Street for years. I thought it was horrible when I would read about how, an elderly couple would lose all their savings in a stock market scam. Well, this is worse. This is really worse, because people are dying in that jail, and off of homelessness, we're profiting. Off of people with mental health issues, we're profiting. And we profit by traumatizing them and making their lives worse, instead of providing solutions that will take them out of our carceral system. And so
what you're talking about, these are common sense approaches to taking care of people. And Victor Gorin, who's watching, says that he did an internship with probation and parole, and his favorite part was making appointments for folks and helping them stay out of trouble. Now, imagine the people that we could get to volunteer for something like that, where, one afternoon a week, they just call people to remind them or send them a text. I love that, but we overthink everything. We want to make it a bigger money issue. We want to spend more money, throw more money at it. Yeah. And before we run out of time, though, speaking of throwing money, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about the jail trust.
Yeah, the jail trust was set up by, and I'm going to give the shortest version. This scheme unraveled before my eyes, and I'm a research hound, so I spent a long time researching it. Basically, what happened is CJAC, Criminal Justice Advisory Council, was set up by the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, it's on their website. They'll tell you that. So they appointed the vice chair of the Chamber of Commerce, Clay Bennett, also the owner of the OKC Thunder, as the chair of CJAC. It is littered with millionaires and billionaires and a few people who I would say some of them are legitimate, but many of them are people who rely on donations from these rich people. So even if they're, oh, I run a nonprofit, I still have to hit that button and vote yes because Clay Bennett's sitting over here in the middle of this. They are the ones who pushed through the jail trust, which was originally chaired by Tricia Everest. Clay Bennett is a son-in-law of a Gaylord. Tricia Everest is also a Gaylord, so are the richest, wealthiest family. She was the chair of the jail trust. On that trust sat Sue Ann Arnall, the ex-wife of Harold Hamm, and Sue Ann does some good things, but in this case, they hyper focus on pushing the jail through. They want a bigger jail, and the other half of the equation is they want to bulldoze that jail down there because it's a valuable property and it's a money grab all the way around. So this new jail will be controlled by the jail trust, who was set up by the county commissioners using a kind of a loophole in the state constitution, because there's a specific title to set up a jail trust which requires a vote of the people. Instead, they set up a property trust, meaning they voted on it and left us out of the equation. So we didn't even get to vote on that. Tricia Everest leaves. She takes a job with the Stitt administration. And she was also a vice chair on the Chamber of Commerce. She leaves. She goes and joins the Stitt administration, and Jim Couch takes over, who also sits on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce. So we have to ask yourself, why do these millionaires and billionaires care about incarceration so much all of a sudden?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's turned into a cash cow. It is
Sure.
literally turned into a cash cow. And that's why we don't want mental health under the auspices of the jail trust.
Absolutely.
So we're just asking people, now that that bond issue is passed, and it largely passed because Democrats did not get out and vote in the numbers that we should have. So y'all keep that in mind with this election coming up. We don't have to have more Republicans in the state than Democrats. We have to turn out more Democrats to vote. We can beat them just by turning out Democrats to vote. And we're at a critical time in Oklahoma right now with all of these issues. Education also ties into it, that you opened your show with. All of those things will ultimately reduce mass incarceration. So when we have the deadliest jail in the country, a police force that is usually second in the number of civilian deaths in Oklahoma City, and a state that is always first or second in incarceration in the entire world, that is a problem for Oklahoma. And I'm going to kind of end with this. What I have found is that this is a universal issue, and another one that both sides of the aisle can agree on. It's the bought and sold politicians often who don't agree on it. But if you the people say, yes, we want to do the right thing. We don't want to lock up everybody for everything.
We are going to have to move along, Mark, but one of our viewers is already asking if you will come back, and I was going to ask that again. I was going to ask that of you too. I want to continue this very important conversation, and I know that you're doing some work right now that we weren't able to talk about tonight just because of time and where things are in the legal process. But if you'll come back, I would always welcome you here. You are such a champion of the people and somebody that I really admire. So Mark Faulk, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to tell everybody that there is an active DOJ investigation and an active grand jury investigation. So there is hope on the horizon.
That's good news. Thank you, sir. Good night. Well, before we leave, there's something that I want to show you. And this is a woman to me who defines class. These are the words of Michelle Obama last week at the White House at the unveiling of her portrait with President Obama. And what she had to say about our democracy is worth sharing. And I need to point out that this does come to us from our friends at the Lincoln Project.
Believe it or not, it is still a bit odd for me to stand in this historic space, see this big, beautiful painting staring back at me. Growing up on Euclid Avenue, Mommy, I never could have imagined that any of this would be part of my story. But even if it's all still a bit awkward for me, I do recognize why moments like these are important, why all of this is absolutely necessary. Traditions like this matter, not just for those of us who hold these positions, but for everyone participating in and watching our democracy. You see, the people, they make their voices heard with their vote. We hold an inauguration to ensure a peaceful transition of power. Those of us lucky enough to serve work, as Barack said, as hard as we can for as long as we can, as long as the people choose to keep us here. And once our time is up, we move on. And all that remains in this hallowed place are our good efforts and these portraits. Portraits that connect our history to the present day. Portraits that hang here as history continues to be made. So for me, this day is not just about what has happened, it's also about what could happen. Because a girl like me, she was never supposed to be up there next to Jacqueline Kennedy and Dolly Madison. She was never supposed to live in this house, and she definitely wasn't supposed to serve as First Lady.
What she said about hope for what can happen. That's what I need all of us to hang on to, because as we move forward toward our midterm elections, we have real reason to be hopeful this year. The Democrats who have stepped up to run for public office, we have a slate like we haven't seen in a very long time. Well-qualified candidates who genuinely care about the people of Oklahoma. I don't do this often, but tonight I will ask so that we can help support them through this last leg of the candidacy. I hope that you will consider making a gift to the Oklahoma Democratic Party. It's very simple, and believe me, every nickel counts. So if anything that you can give, believe me, will be put to use electing these fine people to offices that they're running for, they're pouring their heart and soul into, because they believe not just in what Oklahoma is, but what we can become. Friends, we're all out of time, but I want to thank again Mark Faulk for joining us, and a very special thanks to you for tuning in tonight. It's truly a pleasure, and I hope that you will join me next week when our guest will be Naomi Andrews, who is running for U.S. Congress in CD2. So that'll be a really good opportunity for you to get to know her. Wherever you are in the state, remember that we're not just electing people within our districts. We're electing people who will raise up our voices, lift up our concerns, and work for all of us. Speaking of all of us, on behalf of everyone here at the Oklahoma Democratic Party, I'm Scott J. Hamilton. Good night.